Oh, well, here we are once again, a video version of this week's message. Now, a little caution. This message video might be a little longer than I normally do. The reason for that is rain is predicted for tomorrow, Sunday. So we may not be able to have our outdoor worship service. And so normally these videos are shorter than the message I actually deliver at church. This week it might be a little bit longer just in case we don't get to have a worship service. So just to let you know, feel free to drop it off at 10 or 12 minutes, which is my normal length. But otherwise, you get the full thing today. Also want to let you know, yes, the Fishers are fully embracing the time of year. We have our official Fisher family pumpkin for this year, not carved yet, but we have one. Just so you know that. Well, 10% of all Americans are left-handed. Does that include you? I'm right-handed, always have been. But as a guitar player, I do a lot with my left hand, which is kind of strange if you're a right-handed guitar player and you first start out, all the complicated stuff's done with your left hand, which maybe doesn't make logical sense, but that's the way it is. But 10% of all Americans, if you're left-handed, you want to know that August 13th is International Left-Handers Day. And right now in this country, we're thinking about who's going to be our next president. We've got an election coming up. Many of us have already voted. In fact, I heard on the news something like 50 million Americans, I think they said, have already voted in the presidential election. But we have had quite a few presidents who were left-handed. In the past, James Garfield, Herbert Hoover, Harry Truman, Gerald Ford, Ronald Reagan, George Herbert Walker Bush, Bill Clinton, and Barack Obama, all left-handed presidents. Other famous people who are left-handed or were left-handed, of course, as a guitar player, as you can see behind me, Jimi Hendrix played left-handed. And in fact, he played a right-handed Stratocaster. That's a Stratocaster right back there on the wall. But he played a right-handed Stratocaster, which he turned over and didn't restring it. So he actually played a guitar upside down. So imagine that. Word is also that he could actually play right-handed, but he preferred playing left-handed. Other famous left-handed people, Aristotle, Leonardo da Vinci, Napoleon, Benjamin Franklin, baseball great Babe Ruth, Henry Ford, Oprah Winfrey, Bill Gates, and for those fans of The Simpsons, Ned Flanders was left-handed. Left-handed comedians include David Letterman, Jay Leno, Lenny Bruce, George Burns, and Jerry Seinfeld. In fact, one of Seinfeld's bits from the 1970s was about being left-handed. He used to say, "I'm left-handed. Left-handed people do not like that the word is so often associated with negative things. 2 left feet, left-handed compliment. Bad ideas are always out in left field. When are we leaving or what are we having for dinner? Leftovers. You go to a party, nobody's there. Where'd everybody go? They left." According to research in the American Journal of Psychology, lefties are better at divergent thinking and complex reasoning, which over the years has resulted in numerous left-handed people winning Nobel Prizes, including Madame Curie, who won 2 of them. So left-handed people, you're in good company. Now why, you might be asking, am I putting all this emphasis on left-handed people? Well, that's because of our focus for today. We are in the second week of a series from the Old Testament book, Judges. And each week we're looking at different judges who served during that time. And the judge for this week is Ehud, who's described as a left-handed person. Now there's a reason for that. Last week we looked at Othniel, who was the first judge of Israel. Ehud was the second. An important detail to the story is that he is in fact left-handed. Ehud's full name in his culture was Ehud Ehud bar Gera, that is, son of Gera, from the tribe of Benjamin. Historian Josephus described him as a man of great courage, of a very strong body, and was fit for hard labor. Now, Josephus's Antiquities includes information not found in the Bible, so I'm going to include some of those details in today's message as well as the biblical description. Now, in Judges chapter 3 is the story of Ehud, beginning with verse 12. Once again, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord. Remember from last week, there's this pattern where the land does well for 40 years or more. Then the judge dies. The Israelites do evil in the eyes of the Lord. And because they did this evil, the Lord gave Eglon, king of Moab, power over Israel. Remember that name, Eglon, king of Moab. He recruited the Ammonites and the Amalekites to join him. Eglon came, attacked Israel, and took possession of the city of Psalms. More on the city of Psalms later. The Israelites were subject to Eglon, king of Moab, for 18 years. Again, the Israelites cried out to the Lord. That's part of the pattern we will see over and over in Judges. The Israelites cried out to the Lord. He gave them a deliverer, Ehud, a left-handed man, son of Gera the Benjamite. The Israelites sent him with tribute to Eglon, king of Moab. Now, Ehud made a double-edged sword. Remember this detail. A double-edged sword about 1.5 feet long, which was strapped to his right thigh under his clothing. He would have been wearing a cloak over that. Now that's important because if he had been searched for weapons, they would not have expected a weapon to be strapped to his right thigh because most people in those days were right-handed, so it would be strapped to his left thigh. He presented the tribute to Eglon, king of Moab, who was a very fat man. Now there's a reason why that detail is brought into the story as well. After Ehud had presented the tribute, he sent on their way the men who had carried it. At the idols near Gilgal, he himself turned back and said, I have a secret message for you, O king. And the king said, Quiet, and all of his attendants left him. Ehud then approached him while he was sitting alone in the upper room of his summer palace. This was the palace he had built at the city of Palms. As the king, I have a message from God for you, he said. As the king rose from his seat, Ehud reached with his left hand and drew the sword from his right thigh and plunged it into the king's belly. Even the handle sank in after the blade, which came out his back. Ehud did not pull the sword out, and the fat closed in over it. Then Ehud went out to the porch. He shut the doors of the upper room behind him and locked them. After he had gone, the servants came and found the doors of the upper room, found them locked, and they said, Well, he must be relieving himself in the inner room of the house. They waited to the point of embarrassment, but when he did not open the doors of the room, they took a key and unlocked them. There they saw their Lord fallen on the floor, dead. While the servants were waiting for Eglon, Ehud got away. He passed by the idols, escaped to Sirah. When he arrived there, he blew a trumpet in the hill country of Ephraim, and the Israelites went down with him from the hills, with him leading them. Follow me, he ordered, for the Lord has given Moab, your enemy, into your hands. Remember, they've been under oppression by Moab for 18 years. So they followed him down, and taking possession of the fords of the Jordan that led to Moab, they allowed no one to cross over. At that time, they struck down about 10,000 Moabites, all vigorous and strong. Not a man escaped. That day Moab was made subject to Israel, and the land had peace for 80 years. Now remember, under Othniel, they had peace for 40. So under Ehud, Israel experiences peace for 80 years. Now you understand why the detail of Ehud being left-handed was important. It's possible that he was ambidextrous, and this is because of a description found in 1 Chronicles chapter 12, the first two verses, about men to whom he was related. These were the men who came to David, King David, so this is a later time, while he was banished from the presence of Saul. They were armed with bows and were able to shoot arrows or to sling stones right-handed or left-handed. They were relatives of Saul from the tribe of Benjamin, so Ehud would have been related to them, so it's a possibility he might have been ambidextrous. By the way, 1% of Americans are ambidextrous. They can use either hand, of course. That would include Nikola Tesla and Albert Einstein, and who were U.S. citizens, although not born in the U.S. They were immigrants. I personally think ambidextrous people must be organists and drummers. In fact, they have to be able to use both hands and both feet. I think playing like a pipe organ and playing a set of drums has to be the most complicated instruments of all. So I really admire all you organists and all you drummers. So the setting for this death is the city of palms, also known as Jericho. The Bible makes several references to Jericho. You've probably read some of them. It was the city where Rahab received the spies, where Joshua placed a curse on anyone who would try to rebuild the city. It's where Elijah ascended to heaven. It's where Jesus met Zacharias. Now, historically, there are actually three Jerichos. There's the ancient city that Joshua destroyed. Then there's the city that was rebuilt, not on exactly the same site, when King Herod built his palace there, and a new Jericho was raised up around it. And then there's the modern day city of Jericho. So three different cities, same general region, but slightly different geographic settings. It's also the oldest known city in the world, with archaeological finds dating back to 9000 BC. The villain in the story, Eglon, king of Moab. After he took possession of the city of Psalms, that's where he built his palace, what he was called his summer palace, where he lived 18 years receiving annual tributes from Israel. Moab, his area of origin, is just east of the Dead Sea. That's the region where Moses was buried. It's also the country where Ruth was born and raised. Ruth, whose story comes after the book of Judges, but it was set within the time of Judges. The hero, Ehud, who in Antiquities is further described as having become well acquainted with Eglon. He obtained his favor, worked his way into his confidence. He was trusted by those who were in attendance to the king. It also described the setting with more details. For example, Antiquities described Ehud as coming to Eglon in the summer, in the middle of the day, when the guards were lethargic, perhaps because of the heat. Some had gone to dinner. That's our guy, Ehud. And the deception, of course, in the biblical text, Ehud told the king that he had a secret message. In Antiquities, there's a little bit more described. He told the king that he had a dream to impart to him by the command of God. This announcement caused the king to stand up, presenting Ehud with an even larger target. And because he had his sword naturally attached to his right leg, covered by his robe, there would be no expectation that he even had a weapon with him at the time. And he was able to slay the king and escape unnoticed. Josephus included the detail that Eglon's death then threw the court into great disorder, and many of the attendants fled toward Moab, But because the Israeli army already had taken possession of the fords of Jordan, they were not able to get back to their home country. And the result was Israel had 80 years of peace during this time, with Ehud as their judge. Now, in Judges, we're reading a lot about warring and battles. And it might be easy to assume that God likes war, but really nothing could be farther from the truth. Remember that each of these judges who leads the nation into battle is seeking to defeat those who have previously conquered Israel. For God, the lasting purpose of war is not conquest, it's peace. There's a famous passage in Isaiah chapter 2, which illustrates this, beginning with verse 2. In the last days, the mountain of the Lord's temple will be established. At the highest of the mountains, it will be exalted above the hills, and all nations will stream to it. Many peoples will come and say, "Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the temple of the God of Jacob. He will teach us his ways so that we may walk in his paths." The law will go out from Zion, the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. He will judge between the nations and will settle disputes for many peoples. They will beat their swords into plowshares, their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not take up sword against nation, nor will they train for war anymore. I look forward to that day of peace. Now we've met the first two judges. Next week, we're going to skip over Judge 3, which is Shamgar. He only receives one verse right at the end of chapter 3. And we're going to look at the fourth judge, who's the first woman judge, named Deborah. I look forward to us spending some time looking at Deborah. And what is she like? Who are the beloved? Go and be the beloved.